Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by an esteemed English conductor, Andrew Manze. He's here in the orchestra conducting a Mozart program. Welcome, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here in Amsterdam.
I'm going to take you right back. Now, where did it all start? Were you a choir boy?
No. I did sing once in a children's opera, and that was my one experience of singing. I loved it, but I was playing the violin from about the age of 10, and I fell in love very early on with orchestras and symphonies, and playing a violin was a very good way to get into orchestras. So I think from the age of 11 I've been in an orchestra or conducting them ever since.
Youth orchestras?
Yes.
This is, okay.
The local area, I'm from a town called Bedford, the very good school orchestra, then the county, the region, then the National Youth Orchestra, then the European Youth Orchestra, and there are two colleagues playing, as I'm working with the Concertgebouw at the moment. Three of us were in the orchestra together, the European Youth Orchestra, back in the early 1980s, so it's nice to see them again.
Yeah.
And then I went, of course, I then did I went to the side, I went to Baroque violin. I went into the Baroque world, which brought me to the Netherlands.
But just before that, you studied classics at Cambridge.
Yes.
What was the reasoning behind studying classics? Was that just in case things didn't work out kind of thing, and then you've got something behind you? Or?
Yes, I think for me, I had the very good advice, which is, music is tough. I was talented, I had talent, but I wasn't like a wunderkind. I wasn't going to be doing concertos at the age of 18. So my school gave me good advice, which is, think more broad. You will always have a violin there. You can always study and play. So I did study and I played a lot. And Cambridge University was an amazing place. We were doing concerts all the time. And I managed to do the study. So I learned the life skill of sort of doing too much.
Multitasking.
Yes, doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so at university, and it doesn't, my point being that you don't have to go to a conservatoire to continue your music studies. And in many cases, actually, when students come to me, for instance, that have been to Oxford or Cambridge, I'm always like, what are you doing here at the Royal Academy of Music? You've got a proper degree, you can go and get a proper job. Yeah. But do you find that maybe the connection between the learning side was then connected into the Baroque violin side? It's a very learned area of music making.
For me, I can only be look at this decision with my own eyes. For me, it was the right thing, because I learned all sorts of skills doing the classics. You're looking at a tiny scrap of manuscript with a few scratchings on it, and you're trying to recreate a poem from this. It's rather the same with a piece of music. All we've got is scratchings on a page, and of course that's not, if we just reproduce exactly the marks on the page, you'll have a very dull performance. What makes a performance interesting is the humanity we bring into it, the personality, the character, the decisions we make as musicians. And I learned, I'm still feeling the benefit of having had that classical education where you look at a piece of information and you question it. Is it accurate? So every accent, every note I'm looking at, even in Mozart, I'm questioning. What does he mean by this? It's a note, we know what the note is, but how should we play it? And so you're looking at context, you're looking at any information you can, and it's not just Mozart. I apply it to all the music I do, this approach, which is to question a lot. I don't feel I have so many answers, but I've come up with some rather good, rather serviceable solutions.
I think it's a strange thing that with music, we have the dots on the page, we have all the information there, but what many people don't realize perhaps is that actually we've got very little information there. It's just whatever that composer happened to mark at the time, and it's not always consistent. Certainly we're playing Mozart this week, for instance, it's full of inconsistencies. And so there are many learned people along the way that additions, different additions throughout history. And I know that you've also been involved with making additions, an addition being the sort of Bible, if you like, a version of a piece of music. Has that also come from the research that you've done with the classics, and it's just so somebody has put down what they think it all means?
Yeah, I mean that work you're describing, to get to the point where you know what the piece of music you want to play, what it actually is, that then is the starting point of the process. I think a comparison for those who aren't into music or don't read music, think of like the plays of Shakespeare, where the scholars have worked out what every word should be, or I think they have, they probably still argue about it a bit, but we know what the words are, and then it takes a great actor or actress to bring those words to life, to deliver the words in a way we understand them. In a sense, that I've been involved with getting the music to the point where we, as musicians, as performers, can then start to work.
And how easy is it then to separate for you that research area to the performing, which is one of the most interesting things about you? There are many interesting things, forgive me for complimenting you so plainly, but it's fascinating knowing your history and knowing the knowledge. You give us a lot of information. But you don't ram it down our throats. It's information, it's interesting, but we've still got to play music, and that's what's so fresh about having you here. How do you separate the two? Because there are where you succeed, dare I say, many have failed. We've had many historical conductors, and frankly, it's nothing to do with music.
Yeah.
It's to do with a pen or a pencil.
Yeah. Thank you for what you say. I'm touched that you say that, because it's a very simple answer. I look for information that I find can be helpful or interesting to me, and I share it with another musician if I think it might be useful or interesting for them, especially if it's interesting. I don't want to lecture an orchestra,
right,
especially Concertgebouworkest, but if I find something interesting and it sheds light on a piece, then wow, I'll share that. I mean, one obvious thought would be that the violin concerto that we've been working on, Mozart played it. So it's not only a soloist and an orchestra, but it's Mozart surrounded by, and he's probably about, how old is he, 17 or something?
Yeah.
He's surrounded by these, they're all men, of course, in the orchestra at that time, these colleagues who are probably all older than him. He's grown up with them. They are looking at him as that fantastic, talented young man who probably is a nice man. I've never read anything about Mozart that suggests he wasn't a nice guy.
Only precocious.
Yeah, of course, but never unpleasant.
Right.
He's the most talented person in Salzburg, probably in Austria, probably in the world at this time. But he never comes over as unpleasant. Yeah. And there's his father sitting, playing in the orchestra, proud as anything that this is his son, or maybe a little disapproving that he's not doing the right fingering. I don't know. Yeah. But to bring it to life in that way, this music isn't something historical. It's not 200 and something years old. It's right now. We can imagine how it would feel for Mozart to stand and all. I imagine in the orchestra people going, he's written another piece. I wonder what this one's like.
You'd hope so, wouldn't you? You'd hope so. You said a really interesting thing during rehearsal that during Mozart's day, they didn't have pencils.
Yeah.
Because, of course, it's our immediate reaction. You say something, as the orchestral musician, we immediately pick up our pencil and put it in the part.
Yeah.
It's a sign of respect. It's a sign of us remembering. Some of us need it more than others. But in his day, to your frustration as a historian, a musical historian, there are no markings because pencils didn't exist.
Yeah, and also the quality of paper is often so bad. If you put a pencil, it'll go straight through. You'll break the music. So they sort of looked after their music. The only things we see are if there's a wrong note, someone might change that, so that they correct a mistake. But you see almost no performance markings in the sense of here, let's get louder, or here, bowings for string players, should the bow move this way or that way. Nowadays, we spend quite a lot of time, and the librarians, before we rehearse, they're spending a lot of time getting the bowings sorted, so we don't lose time in rehearsal. And these things aren't there. They did it all by just feeling, and there was very many conventions amongst it. If you think about it, they're only playing the music of their day. They're only playing classical music. The Concertgebouw is 1 week is classical, another week is contemporary, another week is Brahms, and then it'll do a Bach Passion sometimes. The range of music is it bewilders you. And Mozart's musicians just were staying with what they did. They didn't play any new music. The oldest music they played was probably 2 months old, as the sort of the oldest. Everything was new. They've done that one now. Let's do another one.
And they happened to have somebody in their ranks that was able to famously just pop out a concerto in a day.
Incredible.
Amazing. Yeah. Now let's go then back to, you said that you came here to the Netherlands. You have a long history here in the Netherlands. You're famous actually here in the Netherlands as a Baroque violinist. You studied with Ton Koopman.
Well, I met Ton when I was a student. I didn't really study, but he asked me to join his orchestra, the Amsterdam Baroque Orchestra. And because of a sort of change of personnel, within a couple of years, I was the concertmaster of his orchestra. I was very young, I don't know, I was early 20s, and it was, of course, an amazing opportunity. Ton is an incredible man. I mean, you maybe know him. I'm sure many of our listeners know him.
He's conducted us many times.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, wow, the ability he has, still has, I'm sure, he's still so active.
Yes.
We would play a program, we would do it many times, we would go on tour, and every night, I mean, how many Bach First Suites did I do with Ton? I think I've done about 50 with him. He's done hundreds, if not thousands of performances, and every night we're looking at him. We're trying to feel what he's feeling, because there were small changes. He always had great respect for the music, but anything could happen. His favorite dynamic, thinking of pencils writing it in, was plus minus, meaning here it could go louder or it could go softer. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Mm-hmm. And I learned such a lot from this thing of saying, let's not fix the music. Let's let the music be and see what happens tonight.
And time scale, how long ago was that?
This was
80s?
Yes, I joined his orchestra in about 88 or something like that, and I was there. I would think I was in the orchestra about 5 years, 6 years, something like that.
Living here in the Netherlands?
Well, no, I was living in England, and so many of his players at that time were travelling over. Yeah. There were very few Dutch players. I did play a lot of chamber music with Jaap ter Linden, who was a very fond colleague of mine. But at that time, just the way it was, there were not so many Dutch musicians actually in the Amsterdam Baroque Orchestra, ironically.
Yeah, it's a very, well, the Netherlands became this sort of mecca for early music.
Yes.
Somehow through history, we have places like this that crop up in the world, and the Netherlands was definitely one of them. I can remember very much my Baroque playing friends, all wanting to come to The Hague and wanting to come to Amsterdam. It's just one of those strange things. I'm going to skip forward a little bit to the moment where you decided, I'm not going to play the violin anymore.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, that was a very slow process. I was playing, let's say, 99% of the time and conducting a little bit. I always did a little conducting as a student as well. And then there was more conducting being asked, and then I had less time for playing. And there came a point, I'm the sort of violinist, I needed to practice a lot to keep one condition, to get better. I needed to practice more hours than there were. So some conductors, you think someone like Daniel Barenboim can do a Wagner opera one night and sit down and play a Bach recital the next day. This is staggering, what someone like that, and he's not the only one. I couldn't do that. So there came a point where I thought, and I was getting really tired, physically tired. I was getting a little older. I was in my 40s. I was feeling the fingers with Baroque music. You need dexterity. It's all about detail, controlling the bow in the smallest thing. The fingers moving very fast. The ornamental things. I was feeling it was beginning to slow a bit. So I thought, okay, I'll take some time off. Because I was really tired. I'd done a lot.
There's a rumour that you were in the middle of a very large recording project. Is that true?
I thought I'm going to record the solo Bach sonatas and partitas.
Which in itself is insane.
Yeah.
Let's just make that clear.
And yes. And for someone like me, this was so on the edge of what's possible for me. I mean, people have been very complimentary about my playing, but it reminds me of a comment that the great jazz violinist Stefan Grappelli said to Yehudi Menuhin. Stefan Grappelli said, the difference between you and me is that I play what I can and you play what you can't. Meaning that Stefan Grappelli says, if I need to practice it, I just don't play that. It was a little the same with Baroque. I was very exploring. I did a lot of ornamentation, but I wasn't my technique was not a sort of watertight technique. So, for example, the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, I might have got through it, but none of us would have enjoyed the process. I used to have, when I was a teenager, practicing Mendelssohn actually, we had a family that had a dog. The dog, when I played Bach, he would come and sit and listen. When I played Mozart, he would go out. And I did experiments. I went from Mendelssohn back to Bach and he came in. But when I played Mendelssohn, he left. And I realized Mendelssohn is not for me. But Bach is okay. No, but seriously, I mean, there's a sort of limit with violin playing, and I think for me, Bach was on the limit, and it sort of pushed me over the edge, and I needed a break from that.
And am I to understand that it was literally from one day to the next, you just said, okay, that's that.
Yeah.
It goes in the case.
Yeah. I did. I knew that I had a lot of concerts, a lot of them with Richard Egar, who of course lives in Amsterdam, wonderful, wonderful musician, keyboard player, conductor. We were at Cambridge together. We played, well, we did concerts together for 25 years. We always make the joke that we played together for about 8 years. It took that long to get together. But no, we always had a great contact, a great bond, and he's someone I owe a lot to as a musician. I learned a lot from him. I've had some of my great memories of just simply playing music with Richard, not always in public even. Yeah. So Richard's very important to me. And we had a big tour. We went to Japan, we went to South Korea, and then, as you say, I closed the case and I haven't opened it since. Just the way it went. And I'm happy. I get to meet violinists I wouldn't have met. You know, I've conducted with Frank Peter Zimmermann, Christian Tetzlaff, James Ennis, and more. I'm missing out some other wonderful ones. Isabel van Keulen, of course. I've done a lot with Isabel. I wouldn't have met these people if I was still scratching away on my Baroque fiddle. So actually, I'm very happy that I made that decision.
Well, we're very happy too. The conducting career, interestingly enough, if you Google you, is very much about the fact that you conduct mainly now modern orchestras. You're not one of these, exactly as you say, these sort of lecturing Baroques that come in and force the orchestra. We are not, during these times that we're working together during these days. I don't feel that I'm under pressure to play in a certain Baroque style. We're letting the music play do its job. Yeah. Why is that? Why are you avoiding working with Baroque orchestras, or do you feel that your calling is more useful in modern orchestras with modern instruments, I should say?
It's a little of several things. I remember doing Handel's Water Music, a masterpiece of sweet, lovely dance music. When I did that with period instrument orchestras, it was sort of, Handel's Water Music again. Oh God, here we go. And they played it well, but there was a sort of, oh no. I remember coming to a normal symphony orchestra in Germany. I thought, this is amazing music. They were sitting there, they couldn't believe it. They'd maybe known it when they were children, but to play it to a very high level, they were loving it. And I thought, wow, this is so nice. This is so good for me. This is recharging my batteries. But also I've done all sorts of music. The first concert I conducted had contemporary music in because they asked me to do that. I said, look, that's not what I'm sort of known for. They said, well, that's what we want you to do. So I approached it as I approach everything.
You have a slightly obsessive streak in you that has got the words Vaughan Williams attached to it, which is very interesting. In this orchestra, as Englishmen, we've grown up with this music. In this orchestra, I believe we've only played the tuba concerto because our solo tuba player is astonishing and he loves the piece. But apart from that, we've not played any Vaughan Williams at all. For those who have never heard of Vaughan Williams, he's an English composer and composed amazing stuff. I know that you were doing a cycle, is that right?
We did, yes, I've done it, yes. Vaughan Williams is one of those composers who goes in and out of fashion. And at the moment in Britain, he's very in. Now, 20 years ago, he was very out. When he lived, born 150 years ago, died in 1958 or something like that. And when he wrote his 9th symphony, as in that last year, people said, oh, this is so old-fashioned, we've heard all this before. In fact, they were missing out on the fact that the 9th is a masterpiece. He'd sort of honed his skill to the point where the 9th is an incredible symphony. But then fashions come and go. Now, I do Vaughan Williams because I love it, so I try only to do things that I love. So I love it, and I've loved it since I was a boy. In England, other people love it, so I do it quite a lot in England. But to do it outside England, or I should say Britain, is very interesting. When I can persuade an orchestra to do it, it's never failed. I'm chief conductor in an orchestra in Germany, Hanover, the North German Radiophilharmonic. They offered me the job after doing a Vaughan Williams symphony. They offered me the job of chief conductor. I remember after the first concert, they were crowding around me saying, "How many symphonies are there? We want to do more." Yeah.
How many have you done with them since?
Actually, we haven't done much. No, but actually, the reason is that English musicians like you and me have to be careful not to ram English music down people's throats. We should only do it when the time is right and when it's great music. Yes. So I would say, let's say with Concertgebouw, I would say if we did Vaughan Williams' Fifth Symphony, people would be in love with Vaughan Williams. If we did Walton First Symphony, I don't know if you've played that one. Maybe possibly
I've attempted it a few times.
It's really hard, isn't it?
Incredibly
it's
difficult.
Seriously difficult.
William Walton, another contemporary, yeah.
Yeah. Michael Tippett's The Second Symphony.
Again, I've attempted that a couple of occasions, not very successfully.
No, very difficult. But when it works, you need a great orchestra to make these pieces work. But as I say, I never do these pieces because they're English and I'm trying to I have a mission. I'm more trying to do good music and getting the right piece to the right orchestra. So if you were to say it here in the Concertgebouw, let's do a Vaughan Williams, I would say do number 5, because that's how I fell in love with Vaughan Williams, and it's an incredible piece with the most heavenly ending of any symphony I know. Yes. And I think the orchestra would love it, and I know that it would sound amazing.
They would play it amazingly well, but yes.
You think of the brass sound here, the woodwinds, what you have.
Why don't we start? We'll start a mission. We'll see.
And this bed of string sound. It's just perfect.
Watch this space, everybody. Vaughan Williams 5 coming your way. And now you said that you work in Germany. You have a chief conductorship in Hanover.
Yeah.
I know that you don't speak German to the press. You do speak a little to the orchestra.
Hardly, actually.
Now, let's just cover this.
Yeah.
Why? For a man who's been to Cambridge, you would. I'm just getting out all of the things that get said to me. Yeah. I didn't go to Cambridge, so I've got a good excuse as to why I don't speak Dutch very well. But certainly I don't speak Dutch in the media because I'm just nowhere near good enough for it to be fluent.
That's the problem, is that the little German I have, and it's really little, it's the sort of buying a cup of coffee German, isn't at all sophisticated enough to do an interview and to speak with any sense of subtlety about ideas. Also, to be really painfully honest in public, I'm very lazy and I'm not very good at languages. I'm okay with dead languages, Latin and Greek. I'm just not very good with living languages, and I'm sort of embarrassed to do something really badly.
I know that you live in Sweden. Do you speak any Swedish?
Hardly any Swedish. And this is shaming. I know, you're right. And I get messages from people saying, "Come on, you ought to by now. You ought to be speaking German."
You and
to
me
us.
both.
yeah. And you are right. And it's.
And then what is it about the English and languages? Because I don't know whether I know anybody that's English that lives in the UK that speaks another language fluently.
One of the problems, I'm sure you find this every day, is the moment people realise you're English, they will go into English. Especially in the Netherlands, especially here, but also in Germany.
But you are also known for speaking to your audiences.
Yes.
You're one of the few conductors that is happy to speak to an audience, turn around and face the audience other than just bowing.
Yeah.
And this, I'm a big fan of this. There's a wonderful story about you that I heard about the Schubert's great symphony and your introduction to Schubert's great symphony. I believe it was in Melbourne.
It's called the Great Symphony, and so I actually took my scores of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which is also quite an important symphony, and Schubert's Ninth, the Great, and I weighed them to see. And I told the audience what the result was. And that's right, I weighed a Jupiter Symphony, I think. I weighed my score. So I weighed the scores. And indeed, the Schubert was considerably heavier by a long way.
That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful story. Yeah. Now, I understand that you're a keen cyclist. You cycle everywhere. This is what people have told me. When you can.
Do you know, the bicycle has been an incredible icebreaker? Is that the expression used in Netherlands as well?
It depends what you're talking about.
I cycle everywhere in Hanover. It's a very bicycle city, and people talk to me because they recognise me, and they used my bicycle as the sort of when I arrived. They used the bicycle as a sort of to represent who I was. It was a picture of me with my bicycle. So, and it somehow, and then I realised there aren't many conductors who cycle to work.
No.
Not so many.
No.
I mean, some of them have chauffeurs. I mean, this is
quite
crazy.
a few of them have chauffeurs,
yes.
actually.
And I mean, I'm a conductor. I'm the lucky one here. I'm privileged I travel around and I work with musicians who work really hard. People maybe don't know that, okay, we rehearse from, in Amsterdam's case, the Concertgebouworkest, 9:30 in the morning, and we're usually finished by 2 or 3. And people say, well, that's an easy life, isn't it? But they don't realise the amount of work that's going on around that to keep the condition, to prepare the music, not just for this week, but for next week and the week after. And there's a very difficult week coming in June. You know, these people don't realise. Plus, many are teaching because they are the great players. They should also be passing it on. I'm the lucky one here. I feel privileged to be a conductor. I feel I'm the lucky one, and somehow conductors, I think, are what's the word? They're treated like gods. Conductors are not gods. They're just the lucky musicians who don't have to practice.
Yes. Yes. Yes, that's a very modest thing to say. Let's just date stamp our talk here. We're in the middle of February 2021.
Yeah.
In the middle of a severe global pandemic, which has essentially closed down our business by about 95%. Have you been busy? How have you found getting around? You must have had more tests and jabs and things shoved in places than most of us on a sort of daily basis in order for you to even be able to move around. How have you seen from your, because we haven't gone anywhere, we've just been here, but you obviously have travelled. How have you seen that that's affected the different orchestras that you work with? Just now.
Yeah, of course, I'm seeing some things all orchestras have in common. Most orchestras are sitting with a distance between players and finding it very difficult. They're doing amazing things, but it's not an easy thing. There have been, I think for string players, there's been an interesting positive, which I'm finding when I travel and hear, is that a string player, given more space, there's more space to resonate. The actual string sound is richer, but they're finding it very hard to work as a group. So there are negatives, there are many negatives. Now, the frustrations are enormous, but at least those orchestras are playing. Now, many orchestras are not playing because they don't control their concert hall, very many of them, so there's nowhere for them to go. This is a desperate situation. I've been only once to Britain during this corona time, because travel and quarantine and all these things have been difficult, but also music in Britain has been destroyed. Some of the orchestras have managed to do online things like the Concertgebouw has been doing, but many of them were silent for 6 months or doing chamber music at home, or they were doing what they can. It's wonderful to see how resourceful musicians are. It's like water. You know how water will find a way through. Musicians will find a way to play somehow. I'm worried about the future existence of some orchestras, particularly in Britain, but elsewhere as well. I'm so lucky. I'm working as chief conductor with a radio orchestra in Germany. We could keep playing because we had an audience. We already had an online platform and a radio station. So we were really lucky. We didn't really stop. We did reduce, of course. We've done a lot of chamber music and chamber orchestra things, but we managed to keep going. But we're one of the lucky ones. I'm worried about the musicians that now it's really getting tough. The motivation. I'm even asking colleagues, how are you keeping the orchestra, how are you keeping the spirits up when you're playing in a vacuum, that you cannot see your audience. There is an audience online, we hope, listening, but you can't see them, and it's a bit sort of demoralizing. I was interested by a statistic, which is that football teams, when the little football that is going on, teams playing at home are losing far more than when they had their home crowd cheering them on. There's a sort of statistic that the home crowd was helping teams win. Now, musicians are playing without their home crowd. And so it's really hard to get the excitement going. People are doing amazingly, I think, but I'm sort of getting worried for people's, the flame being dimmed.
Yeah. It's a really fascinating time in our history, but it's a slightly strange thing to say, but I'll say it anyway. Your enthusiasm for music and performance, regardless of whether there's an audience or not that we can see, is infectious. I'm not sure whether that's the right word to use, but anyway, it sort of envelops us. When we're rehearsing with you, it's what's great about you is that you come with a smile on your face, regardless of the mood of the music. It's approached with a very positive and smiley attitude. And right now, I can tell you that we all appreciate a smile. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. And you are bringing enormous joy to us during these times, and you have before, and we look forward to seeing you again. And for our relationship as conductor and orchestra and musical friend to develop over the following years. Thank you so much for speaking to me. Bless you.
Thank you for those kind words, Dominic.
It's a great pleasure.
Thanks.